Hey guys, welcome to my first drive video on this brand new M440i xDrive Gran Coupe. I only have this car for just over an hour, so this is going to be a one-take style video, and hopefully I should cover most of the things that you need to know. This particular press car is in the gorgeous aventurine red paintwork, which is the same colour that I actually had that M8 competition Gran Coupe last year that I took out to Italy in the Stelvio Pass. It's a very classy colour and it contrasts well with the black leather interior. I didn't know this until the briefing this morning, but the previous generation 4 Series, the Gran Coupe, so the 4 or 5-door version that we've got here, actually accounted for 50% of the overall 4 Series sales. So 25% for the Coupe, 25% for the Cabriolet, and 50% for the Gran Coupe. So this is a very important model. It retains the brilliant tried and tested B58 3-litre straight 6 turbocharged engine, produces 374 horsepower and 500 newton meters of torque. This model also has the very latest 48-volt mild hybrid system. The brilliant ZF 8-speed automatic is the only gearbox option for this particular model, and all of that power and torque goes down via BMW's xDrive system. But this is fundamentally a rear-wheel drive setup that sends power to the front axle when it needs it. So just like the M340i, it will be a little bit tail happy, especially in sort of slippery conditions like we have today. Talking of the M340i, well, that currently retails in the UK at about £52,000. The touring variant of that is about £54,000, and this is going to retail at about £56,000. So it's about £4,000 more expensive than an M340i Saloon. And that's interesting to me because the M340i Saloon is one of the best all-round packages I think you can buy today. And if you want something a bit more practical, then you go for the Touring, and this is even more money than the Touring. Is it worth it? The previous shape 4 Series Gran Coupe was also a premium over the 3 Series, but in that version I think it was worth it on looks alone. This new version, I must admit, I'm not sold on its looks. I'm really not taken by them. Obviously this has the controversial grille, which the 4 Series has. The M340i has a more traditional BMW kidney grille, but it's not just the grille that puts me off, it's the rear end. The rear 3/4 just doesn't quite work for me on this. Also the wheels, the wheel options, they don't look particularly good. This car comes with P0s, which I also don't think helps its case because Michelin sidewalls look so much better and actually improve the way the wheel look. I know that sounds crazy, but it is true, at least in my head. If you're buying this on looks alone, well, for me, it doesn't do it. But obviously, everyone has different tastes, thankfully. A base level M440i xDrive would have your normal serum grey telltale sign. So serum grey canards down here. The door mirror caps would also be serum grey. This one has got the extended shadow line package. So basically, most of that gets blacked out. You might be able to see also, talking of door mirrors, this now has BMW M door mirror caps, which I'm not, again, that excited about. I think that door mirror should be reserved for M cars and not M lights. As with the previous gen 4 Series Gran Coupe, this one retains the frameless doors in the front and for the back doors. And you might notice this car also has some new door handles, which look really smart when the doors are closed, but in terms of how they work and operate, I'm not quite sold on them. It's sometimes a little bit tricky to get your hand under there and actually use it. Your hand tends to slip occasionally, and I'll be intrigued to see what they're like when it's wet and cold, but they do look good when the doors are closed. When we walk around to the boot, well, open this up, we've actually got 470 litres here, and as with the previous gen Gran Coupe, it's actually a really practical space to load awkward objects around. When you fold those rear seats, you can put things like mountain bikes and stuff in there a lot easier than you could do with the Saloon, the M340i for instance, but it's still not a 3 Series Touring in here. The biggest issue I had with the previous gen 4 Series Gran Coupe was interior space compared to the 3 Series. And this one is no different whatsoever. In fact, I haven't even tried to sit in the back yet off camera, so this will be interesting. First, let's just jump in the front. This is my driving position. Just a quick reminder, I'm 6'4", so I am taller than your average male. But yeah, reasonably comfortable up here, and it feels very much 3 Series. But when we go to get in the back, well, the first thing you notice is the doors appear to be very small, and therefore the opening to get in is very small. And I think this is going to be a challenge. Firstly, I can already see I'm not going to have enough leg or knee space, and then I'm concerned about my head space. Okay, well, I've put mud all over the back of this seat. This is not particularly comfortable, and if I try and put my head back, it's touching the head lining. Also, if I was a little bit shorter and I could put my head back, well, I'll be blessed with this C-pillar to look at, and my visibility out the side window would not be great. The fit and finish back here is amazing, and I have got 3-zone climate, and this particular car has heated rear seats as well, which I'm sure is an option. There's some USB-C plugs down there for my charging, but really this is designed for smaller adults or children. Bigger adults like me, especially if you've got bigger adults up front, just won't work. I'm really up against it with time, so you're gonna have to bear with me in this video. My initial driving impressions, well, as we talked about, I've only had this car about 45 minutes or so. Haven't really had enough time to get under its skin, but to me, well, it feels very similar to an M340i, which it essentially is underneath. BMW are very quick to point out that it is a stiffer setup, stiffer chassis, very like the M440i Coupe, but to me it doesn't feel quite as sharp as the Coupe version. I'm sure, I don't know the figures, but I'm sure this is carrying around an extra 100-odd kilos, because the Gran Coupes always tend to be a bit larger than the Coupe or the saloon versions. In terms of driving position, well, it's actually really good. Typically BMW, I feel like I'm sitting a little bit high, but the last car I actually drove was my M3 yesterday on the way to the airport, and obviously that's got the carbon buckets and one of the lowest driving positions I've ever experienced, so maybe that's why I feel like I'm sitting a bit higher. But saying that, I remember the previous generation 4 Series Gran Coupe, I also thought that I felt a bit higher in that car compared to the 3 Series saloon that it was based on. We've already talked about the slight lack of usability of interior space, and you can certainly feel it when you're in here. The actual cabin itself feels maybe a little bit smaller than the 3 Series. Probably doesn't help that this is all black and fairly dark and German feeling in here. I'm sure if you had a lighter leather colour, it would perhaps feel a little bit more spacious. But in the back, you can just see that it is cramped in there, and rear vision is not that great. And again, when you look back there, it just all looks very tight for space. And in fact, the current 4 Series Coupe, well, we know that the rear bench in that is extremely tight for space, and that's really only suitable for smaller kids or teenagers at a push. But everything else is very familiar in here. We've got the operating system 7 and all of the latest displays and stuff from the rest of the new models from BMW. So it's a very nice place to sit. But I am left wondering why you would buy this over a cheaper M340i saloon, because in my opinion the M340i is a better looking car. It's arguably more practical, especially for rear cabin space, and undoubtedly more practical if you're talking about the Touring. And as far as I can tell, they don't seem to drive any different. This comes standard with adaptive suspension, I believe. In terms of ride quality, well, I'd rather not really comment, because I'm out here on beautiful German roads, and as I experienced with that M4 that I had recently, well, everything over here just feels like it's on a magic carpet. You know, this feels very much like it's a 5 or 7 series. So until I've driven one of these back in the UK on our UK roads, I'd rather not comment on what it's like in terms of ride. But it is great that you can get the adaptive suspension, and as I believe it's actually a standard fit option on this flagship M440i Gran Coupe. Okay, now we're leaving the town behind us. Let's put it into Sport Plus and over into manual, pull a paddle, and see what this car's like when you start pushing it. Pretty decent road we have here. Well, the initial pickup's really good. You can feel that mild hybrid system working down low especially. We all know the B58 is a mighty engine no matter what it's in, and in this sort of 374 horsepower tune, well, it feels really good, even though I get the feeling this car is heavy. It has a claimed 0 to 62 figure of 4.7 seconds, which is pretty quick and certainly quick enough for most people's applications, and it has a limited top speed of 155 miles an hour. I'm in no doubt that delimited it would probably do 175 miles an hour with this amount of power and torque. 374 horsepower, 500 newton meters of torque. When you turn it in for the first time, well, it seems to have plenty of grip. The front end does feel really good, but again, it doesn't feel as good as the M440i Coupe, to me anyway. Maybe some of that has to do with the fact this is on P0s, which I'm not the biggest fan of. And I haven't had a chance to push this car hard on tight and twisties to see if the rear end does in fact rotate, but I'm in no doubt that it will, because again, this is the same setup and configuration as the M340i and the M440i xDrive Coupe. Something I do want to point out is the upshift sounds that this car makes. I quite like them. We'll just do a little launch. Here we go. Oh, did you hear that? Now, at first, I thought that was too good to be true. I actually thought that they were engineered in and they were coming out the speakers, but I'm pretty sure that they're organic, and there is some cracks and pops that come out of the heavily OPF filtered exhaust system. So it actually sounds better than I thought it was going to sound, because I was really setting myself up for a bit of a disappointment in terms of what it sounds like, because cars like the M340i, I know I've said that loads of times in this video, in fact it should be a drinking game, cars like the M340i have got less and less loud throughout their 2-year life cycle so far. Restrictions keep getting tighter. It's not the manufacturers to blame, it's the restrictions that the manufacturers have to go through. So it seems every 3 or 4 months restrictions seem to get tighter, and therefore manufacturers have to make their cars quieter. And so an M340i from early, let's say 2019, is going to sound a lot louder than an M340i from early 2021, and that's just the way it is. But this particular car, well, I've heard a few fly past me that sound pretty good, and from the driver's seat at least, there's no mistaking that that is a B58 and a lovely BMW typical inline-6 motor. My conclusion for this very short first drive video on this M440i xDrive Gran Coupe, well, I personally don't get it, if I'm being totally honest. The looks don't do it for me, and like I said earlier on, the previous generation was sold on looks alone as far as I'm concerned, and this car just isn't right. The angles, the design, I'm just not the biggest fan of it. So that factor alone, I wouldn't have one of these over, let's say, an M340i Saloon. There's another drink. In terms of driving dynamics, well, it does feel every bit as good as the M340i, but again, it's hard to say that categorically because I'm not driving one back to back. And in terms of straight line performance, well, it feels punchy enough. This flagship 440i version definitely feels fast enough for the average punter, and in slippery conditions and stuff, well, this is probably a faster car than my rear wheel drive M3 competition, just due to the fact that it can get its traction or get its power and torque down on the road. When you look at pricing, that further backs up my choice, I guess, of having the 3 Series over the 4 Series Gran Coupe, because this is £4 more expensive. And yes, it probably is going to come with 1 or 2 smaller options as standard, but you're left with an extra £4 if you go for the 3 Series that you could spend on options that you actually want. So again, for me, it just doesn't make sense. The long and short of it is, if I had 56 grand to spend on a all-round package from BMW, it would go on the M340i Touring, because I think that car really does everything. Either that or the M340d Touring, which I also rave on about a lot. Just each car sort of fits slightly different purposes, but this particular car, it just doesn't do it for me. It doesn't excite me for the money that they're asking, and the reason that it doesn't really do it for me is because BMW offer better packages, in my opinion, for similar, if not a little bit less money. I hope you've enjoyed this one take, rather rushed video. Excuse me if it was a bit too rushed, but yeah, as you can probably tell by the tone of my voice, I have been running around like a crazy person trying to find a half decent road just outside of Munich to film this video and get the car back to the press office. I will no doubt get my hands on one of these from BMW UK in the future, and I'll be able to do a bit more of a comprehensive review on it. But yeah, until then, my short conclusion is I'm not sold on the looks. It's far less practical inside, at least. The boot's pretty practical, but the rear cabin space really isn't. And when you look at the pricing compared to the 3 Series or the 3 Series Touring, well, this is more expensive than both of them. So for me, I'll take an M340i Touring, thank you very much, and save £2 grand that I could spend on a pan roof or something that I really want on my BMW. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this one take video. Until the next time, I'll see you very, very soon. Take it easy. Cheers.